Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this next installment of the College of Engineering and Computing's Women's Advisory Committee Alumni Speaker Series. We're thrilled to get right into our conversation today with Systems Analysis alumna Dianne Driessen, class of 74, who will chat with fellow Systems Analysis alumna Denise Taylor, class of 92, about the lessons learned and wisdom gained throughout her 40-plus year corporate career. A little background, Dianne is retired Vice President of Instructional Services for McGraw-Hill Education, International Education Services in Monterey, California, where she was responsible for the design and development of educational services solutions. Her primary focus was on the Chinese market, and Dianne currently lives in Monterey, California with her husband, Mark. Denise is the founder of Next Level Business Consulting, a firm providing branding, website design, social media management, and email marketing and podcast production services. From a corporate career to an entrepreneur, Denise's 25-plus year professional career includes leadership roles at Eli Lilly and Company, Caterpillar, and Kohl's Department Store, among others. Denise and her husband, Mark, share two daughters, Shanice and Sierra. Welcome to the two of you, and thank you for being here with us. If our live audience has any questions for Dianne or Denise, you can ask them by clicking the Ask a Question button under your video. And with that, I will turn it over to the two of you to get us started today. Welcome.
So you know what, Molly, I have to say, my husband's name is Chuck. He would be alarmed to learn about Mark, but that's okay. It's okay. It ended with a K, so we're going to keep it moving.
Chuck, my apologies. I do believe Mark is someone else's husband.
That would be mine.
Apologies to both Chuck and Mark. Well, thank you, and welcome to you, ladies, wives of Chuck and Mark. We are so pleased to have you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you, Molly, for how you support us and everything that you're doing. This is our second installment of conversations from some very experienced, empowered women who were a part of the Miami community years ago. And so I'm going to go light on the years ago because as we were just talking, Dianne, we still feel young. And I will tell you, when I looked at your experience, it is still very relevant. And so I'm ready to unpack it a little bit more today. I want to appreciate Molly for reading your bio. And that is just a mere glimpse into the great experience that you had. So why don't you take the reins and just share a little bit more about the highlights of your professional career from your perspective?
Thank you so much, Denise. And thank you, Molly. This is a great honor for me to be here because really Miami is where it all started for me. I was well armed with my degree in systems analysis to go out into the world. And of course, those were the days when we still used punch cards, which is an eternity ago. But it was all a very new field, and there weren't very many women in the field. But I was in a good shape, and after I graduated, I decided, where did I want to live? So I went to Boulder, Colorado, and I got a job with IBM. They had just moved their office products division there from Kentucky. And I was on a small support team, the only woman in the whole group, and the number of people there were engineers, and it was a very interesting experience to be operating in a very scientific environment. I got married a year later and moved to Madison, Wisconsin with my husband, who is in graduate school there. And I got a job there at the University Administrative Data Processing System in the facilities department, and got to see up close and personal what goes on to who gets what parking pass and how classrooms are assigned. And I was very fortunate. I was obviously young, but my manager saw a lot of opportunity for me, and he moved to another position and recommended that I take his place. So I became a manager in that second year of the division. It was a state employees kind of operation. So there were quite a few people who had been there for many years before me. So that was a challenging move for me, but one I was well equipped to handle. Then we moved to Columbus, Ohio for my husband's job. And there I worked for Xerox. Xerox Publishing Group. Some of you may remember the Weekly Reader series, and I was involved with the design of the school marketing system. So I got to work with salespeople and their vision for how to market that product. And in Columbus, I had my two sons. So it's always a warm spot for me. Then my husband's job changed to the Washington, D.C. area. So we moved there and I started working I stayed home for about 4 years and out of the workforce completely, and was able to spend time with my two children. So as many women go through their journeys, this is obviously an important element for some of us. And then I started working for a government contracting firm, but it was a minority small business, and we had a lot of interesting contracts. I worked there for 17 years, and I would have to say that that's the opportunity for me to have understood really all aspects of business, from the concept to planning, to proposals, to development, to documentation, to training, and to ultimately how it all works out from a cost and profit perspective. So in that time, though, I got divorced and faced other different life challenges of being a single mom and needing to make the money that I needed to make on my own. And so I ultimately switched to another company, Fujitsu Consulting, and that was quite a different work environment. Instead of government contracting, we did private business contracting. So I got to see a whole nother perspective on services and consulting. I ultimately then, when my kids were out of the house, decided I now have time to choose where I want to live instead of where my husband's job took us. And so I chose Monterey, California. So I got my mom and my black lab and we drove across the country because my boss had approved me working remotely. So again, I did mention I was working part-time, 3/4 time while my kids were young. And so that worked for me as a mom. And then when I wanted to move to California, I was able to be a remote worker, which was sort of early on for remote working in 2001. And so I worked here for a bit and then changed to McGraw-Hill Education. In the last 10 years of my career, I worked here in Monterey and New York and internationally with McGraw-Hill Education, retiring in 2013. Since then,
I've had a phenomenal career. And when you span time and you have so many incredible experiences, and I will tell you what I really appreciated in your sharing is how you weaved in the life experiences too, because many of us, especially as women, are juggling all of those different dynamics that life brings and choices and decisions that we need to make about life and how they influence career. There's a couple of elements that I really love. I love that you had experiences moving and relocating with your career, that you were in a position to make a choice to be home with your children when you wanted to be, and that you were an early adopter of the remote working, and you were able to move back into establishing or reestablishing your career at the time that you felt it was necessary and you wanted to avail yourself to ramp up. But I think I love the most that you found yourself in a position to make a choice and say to yourself, what do I want? Where do I want to be? And you were able to take the reins and make that move across country and really embrace something new based on your own terms. And so I love that. One of the things I talk about often is success on our own terms. So do me a favor, define success from your perspective.
Well, there's obviously the success of the project, and those, I think probably everybody knows what are elements of that. But for personal success, I feel like it's being able to do something I love and feel like I am able to grow in the process. I want to feel like I have contributed, but I want to feel like I've been able to live on the terms of that are my core values. And so being able to get the work-life balance, being able to have a job that's interesting, being able to work with wonderful people, feel like I have collaboration. I feel when I go home that I'm happy, that, I've done good work and I'm happy.
I love that. I really do. And I think as we have evolved in really empowering our own voices, we find so many women wanting to lean into that more. Now, before we get too far away from the Miami experience,
Mhm.
one of the questions that came in as we were advertising this time with you is, how did your systems analysis major help you in your career? That question came in from Louise. So maybe you can tell us, what was the influence of your major?
Absolutely. And a shout out to Louise. I think that my training was absolutely instrumental in everything I've done since then, both professionally, actually, and personally, because it gave me the ability to see the big picture, the overview, while being able at the same time to hold the details in a way that is analytically organized. I am that kind of mind, and Miami really helped me understand that. I've been in almost all of the positions I've been in. I've been the person in between the technology people and the business users. I was well trained to be able to talk to the business users in their language, understand what they needed, what they wanted. Sometimes it wasn't always the same thing, and we had to talk about that. And then being able to talk with the developers, the programmers, the technical people who only saw things from their perspective. And I was able to, sometimes graphically and sometimes in written word and many times in group settings, bring those two together so that we had a common understanding. And I think that was critical to be able to actually deliver successful projects, because everyone needed to be working towards the same goal and we had to have the same measures. And so I think Miami helped me understand analysis and also the importance of performance measurement.
You know, I relate to that 100%. I too graduated with a systems analysis degree and saw the same benefits and saw the same strengths really help to propel my career, because it's almost like you become a translator, and it's so valuable for the acceleration of projects and goals, and just the alignment between technology and business. So I can 100% relate to what you were saying. The next question I have for you is this: what is the hardest thing you had to overcome to achieve the success you experienced?
Well, actually, it was the fear of failure, because even at Miami, I struggled in one of my early years because I had always done well in high school, and then being challenged in college, I sort of had a stress breakdown because I didn't want to fail. And I think that still carried with me in my work life. And I was always a high performer and generally felt, comfortable where I was. But there were many times when I feel like I had to just trust the team, trust the process, and just trust myself to be able to do what needed to be done and to do my best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when we can really find the ability to tap into that and allow it to woo us instead of overwhelm us, like woo
Mhm.
us to accomplishing and rising up to the occasion, it can really make a difference. But some people find overwhelm in that moment and are not able to work past it. But it sounds like it was like almost an initiator for you to really kick it into overdrive. So I love that perspective. So here's a question for you. What professional feedback did you receive that took you by surprise to hear, but now you're glad that you received it?
Well, the one that comes to mind is in my early years at the University of Wisconsin, when I was promoted at a very young age into a management position over some people who had been at the university for many years. And there was some resentment and there was some difficulty because I was inexperienced. But my boss at that time took me aside and said, "Dianne, you're getting a little big for your britches." And I had to look at that, and I was completely unaware of how my behavior or my interactions with people might be affecting others in my team. And so I actually, it caused me to be just so much more aware of the importance of what I say and how I interact with people, and to be put myself in other people's shoes as I go along. But I also at the same time wondered if he just wasn't used to a woman being assertive. A combination of things. And so I thought, well, this is just the way I am.
That brings up another question that Susanna had turned in before we got on today. She said, at what points in your career were you experiencing ageism? You talked a little bit about sexism. And so some of those isms follow us, right? Because especially at the point where you started, you were a bit of a trailblazer in this industry. You entered many rooms where people didn't necessarily look like you, think like you. And so you faced all of those preconceived notions and those biases, be it around age or gender. So tell us about how you navigated that in your career.
Well, I think I can say that early experience was the first ageism kind of impact that I had. And really for the several years after that, I was young and in a field that was new. And I think people didn't necessarily trust that I could do what I needed to do. So I think I had to continually prove myself and show that I had a basis for what I was presenting, what I was doing, that I had a process, I had an approach, I had, and could lay it out for them. I drew many pictures during those times to show them that I knew what I was trying to do and bring them on board. And then in the later years, really, part of it was, the business restructurings and wanting to have people who had at the higher end of the salaries to be, structured out. And that was actually what happened in my last position. McGraw-Hill was sold, and a young manager came in with his male team, and basically I felt like he didn't ever really respect or care to even hear the things that I had to say. And so that was, part of what many people experience. And it was a good time for me. I was planning to retire, but I was restructured out. So it was the people that were older that generally that moved out. So it's a problem for people. And, for me, it worked out well in my timeline, but if you weren't ready to go, it would be a tough situation to move forward from.
Absolutely. So let's talk about relationships. So how important were mentors or sponsors to your professional success, and how did you forge those type of relationships?
Well, in every single situation, you have a team, and so you are part of a team. You are working for someone, and they're part of a team. And I think understanding teams and how you need each other is important in developing good working relationships. From a mentoring perspective, my bosses, I was very fortunate. With a few exceptions, I had terrific bosses who were interested in good work, who had integrity, and who saw my potential and were very supportive. And I also set aside time to talk with them. I made appointments. I brought things up. I was not afraid to talk about things I didn't know, what I needed to understand. And they were all, very helpful. And being open and being able to communicate was essential. As I moved through, I had one woman manager they were male for the most part, but I had a woman manager in Columbus, Ohio, and she was a wise woman. And we sat together and we commiserated as woman to woman. And I think she really helped me understand the way things worked where we were and made suggestions, and I listened. And then as I was in McGraw-Hill, I had a wonderful CEO here. And when I was given the opportunity to be presented with a vice president position, I didn't know what salary I should ask for. I didn't know what level I should ask for. I didn't really understand how things work because there was not transparency there. And it was generally at McGraw-Hill pretty much of a men's group there. And so this one woman had been an executive for quite a while. I asked her, I sat down with her. I said, what is normal? What do other people have? What should I expect? and they had actually offered me a level below what I should have gotten. So I went back and I said, no, this is what I want. And I wasn't going to take it if I wasn't going to get that. And so, but if I wasn't armed with the information that this other woman had shared with me, I really wouldn't have known to go for that. And that was instrumental to my success and my ability to retire when I wanted to retire.
That's awesome. I love that you opened yourself up to seek out that wisdom and that knowledge. And I also love that she made herself available to support you in that way. And I know oftentimes in our career, that is what's necessary, right? It's the advocacy for one another. But what I really loved about you sharing is the courage to have that conversation and to speak up for yourself and to recognize your value and to push forward for that. And I found even in my own career too, how necessary that was. It's almost like closed mouths don't get fed, right? We've all heard that saying, but at the same time, we have to be willing to lean into that courage and be able to ask for what we should be getting and what we're worth. And so thank you for sharing that story. So when you think of yourself as a leader, what makes you proud?
Well, what makes me proud is that other people thought of me as a leader because it meant that I have done something that caused them to want to be with me, to follow me, to trust me. And so I think it's always in the actions, and you can say a lot of things, but it's really when people do things, that's when you know that's what they really believe. And so I feel like I've had the opportunity, and really it started at Miami too. I was able to, they encouraged leadership, they promoted leadership, they trained in leadership, and I was always thinking of myself as a leader. So it felt natural to me.
Thinking of yourself as a leader. I love that because a lot of times some of those defeating thoughts are arrested when we can begin to see ourselves in the way that we want to see our career go or that successful achievement we're looking to have. And so it really keys into your thinking and your mindset. Being a big factor. Do you have a mantra or anything like that you live by?
Well, I think it's always just do my best and expect good things to happen. That's really how I live my life, and it's turned out pretty well.
That's a good one, right? And it applies to everything, whether it's to parenting as well as relationships and your role. And it also sets the bar. So I think that's a really good one to have. Now, we danced around this a little bit, but I want to go back and see if we can dig deeper into some of your wisdom. We hear a lot about a glass ceiling, right? And maybe you can share some experiences that you saw were barriers to your advancement or some that you ran into or advocated for others with. And how did you navigate that? And what recommendations do you have?
Well, it's a little different to be a woman in a man's world. It's getting better. But at the beginning, many rooms I would walk in, I would be the only woman. And so we operate somewhat differently as people who I think tend to listen and to collaborate to try and find a way to move forward, but not to compromise on what's essential. And I think that having to be at the table is part of the process for breaking the glass ceiling. You have to be able to be at the table. So if sometimes I was at the table in a position that I was not really given my full power, but being there, I was able to move the needle. And then I was also, I think, because I'm at the table in some fashion, be able to be in the minds of people and be present and then move forward when the time is right. There are opportunities that come up all the time in all businesses, and you have to go for those opportunities. So part of it is being aware. Part of it is understanding the environment that you're in, finding ways to be able to open up the conversation, and then possibly working with other women to make a change. And so, there's a lot of power in and working together with others. And for women to get together, we've seen this, and it's continuing. We aren't where we're supposed to be yet, but we're making a change. And so we have to go for it and continually support each other. And I think that is key, helping other women be able to hire them in the positions, helping promote them when it's appropriate, helping to be able to provide opportunities for them to be on the stage or at the table, and then be able to then take those moves forward, apply for the jobs, apply for the new opportunities. And sometimes you're going to get them and sometimes you're not. But also when you hear talk that is negative or demeaning or limiting to women, to stand up and say, no, that's not the reality. This is not the way things really are. And I think those kind of side conversations you might hear, people joking around about things, allows the fallacy of there being women being not quite as good or not quite as ready for the leadership or movement to be dissipated. I mean, it's just, you hear it in conversations all the time. And so I really felt for myself, I had good support from my managers, and I was able to advance. I didn't personally feel much of a glass ceiling for myself until some of the later years in McGraw-Hill. But I think that there was a large women's mentoring group that I joined and participated in, and there was a movement. And so I joined that movement, and we worked together to try and support each other and all moving forward.
I love that. I love that you made yourself available. You saw the value in mentorship. You made yourself available to participate and help. And I also love when you say, I joined that movement, because that's really important for us to understand that when we attain certain roles, it behooves us to not just arrive and think that we don't have the opportunity to bring others, to help open doors, to increase awareness. And I love that you saw the necessity for you to be responsible in that way. I want to tease out some wisdom, some practical wisdom for you. Like, one of the things that I talk a lot about is choosing our battles, right? And so in assessing, when should I say something, when should I not, when you're thinking through how to choose your battles, what factors do you suggest we take into consideration, especially when we're looking to be a support for the movement?
Right. I think it comes back to, what are your personal core values? I feel like there are certain things that you know just are the right thing to do. And so you know that inside you. And I think it's a question of vision for yourself, for women, for the work. And you also have to see a goal. And the goal would be the equality. The goal would be 50-50 or somewhere close for representation, and for women to be in charge, and for advancement to be fair. And so I think for me, the core is having a vision of what I would want to see in the world, having the values that I feel that are important, and then feeling like the action must follow. And so choosing the battle is one where you have to decide, what are the potential consequences, and what are you willing to give for that battle? And some battles aren't worth fighting because you don't see the big gain that you would hope to get there. You might win the battle but lose the war. So you really need to look at the long view and see if it's a systemic problem, if this is the tip of the iceberg. You really need to try and use your analytical skills to be able to say, what's the best use of my battle time, and then see what you're willing to do. But there are certain things that's worth losing the job, or whatever the case may be. And many women have been faced with that, with sexual harassment or unfair pay. I left one job because I wasn't getting the adequate pay, and I had to, it was a little scary, but I had to move on, and I was able to get a job, but I knew that it wasn't right. And so I feel like you have to just use your internal scale of balance and say, this is something I'm willing to go for.
Yeah. When I reflect on my own career, I remember one moment where there was some inappropriate speech with a woman, and I had to just say and really take a stance to say that that was inappropriate and corrective action and measures needed to be taken. And I think to your point of understanding your own values and then taking the action to hold the person or persons accountable for the impact of whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying, is something that we do have to gird ourselves up for and just really do it. Because if we don't give notice to it, there's a big likelihood that it can continue. I also love that you were talking about ways to make sure that we're advocating for the growth and the participation of women at different levels, right? And I think that's one of the core values of even the advisory committee that you and I are a part of for CEC, to try to influence having more women coming into the school and having them be supported with things that will help them make it through, not just get there, but make it through to the other side of obtaining their degree. And so I just love that that has been peppered all through your experience and how you're still participating to advocate for that even now. Maybe you can identify a couple of just mistakes that you've witnessed being made by women that we could just give some very fundamental recommendations back to. Are there any that come to mind for you? And maybe we can give some thoughts to how someone can think through those type of behaviors or that type of thinking differently from some of the mistakes that you've seen made or even done yourself.
Right. I think one of the most common mistakes I see women make is to undervalue themselves, to not really understand how important and how well qualified they are to do the work. And I think that that is something that's sort of systemic in women in society. That's been a problem, but we have to make a change one by one, each of us. And I know that I had that problem some of the times along the way. And so one has to just say, I am worth it. And maybe you just say that to yourself. I am good at what I do and I am worth it. But many women would accept a lesser role or always going to get the coffee at the table. Sometimes you have to say, no, it's not. I'm willing to take turns, but it is not my job. You have to start making some statements. I think that's from a perspective of mistakes I see that's hampered women's progress along the way. Another one is some women feel like they can move forward because they have the favor of men. And so sometimes they curry that favor and sort of use it. And maybe that gets them someplace in the short term, but they lose the respect of the people who know what's going on. It's usually pretty transparent. And I feel like we can do it without doing those kinds of things. We are worth it. We can do it. We have the power to be successful as a human being, as a woman, and we don't have to try and finagle our way into a better position using, sexual, appearances or actions or anything else that, we think could move us forward. In fact, I think it moves us back and moves women back as a group.
Mm-hmm. Your career has definitely had a lot of advancement. You've been really good at assessing opportunities, making moves that were right for you, as well as being able to progress. And so can you give us some practical thoughts around the best way to assess opportunity?
Let's see. Well, when I see an opportunity, sometimes you make your opportunities. And I think that's that's sort of when I decide where I'm moving or have to move for a different reason, I have to then look and see where are my opportunities. But really, I think that I have to know what I'd like to have happen. I like to envision things. When I moved to California, I made a whole vision board of pictures of the ocean and little girl on a horse in a field of wildflowers, and I just had it on my wall for a long time, and I looked at it every day and just saw myself in that place. And so actually when I moved here, I met that little girl. I mean, it's amazing what you can manifest. And so I think when you look for opportunities, you have to put what you want out there, and then as you see them, see how well it fits in with all the things that are important to you. So does it fit your career goals? Does it advance you? Is it just holding even? Is this what you want? What's most important? Do you need more money? And is that the priority? So you need to prioritize what your different decision points are. And in systems analysis, you would have a decision tree and you would be able to assess those things. So, but I would look and see what's got the most importance for me, the highest value, what are the must-haves and what are nice to haves. And so you start with the must-haves and then you try and go with the nice to haves after that.
You have some amazing advice. Amazing, just absolutely amazing. I'm over here beaming on the inside. The last two questions that I have for you are just teasing the advice. Mindy submitted a question to us and she said, what's the best piece of advice you could give a recent female engineering grad?
Oh, that's a good one. I think that every woman graduating from CEC should know that you are well qualified to work in the world. You have got a stellar education. You've got skill sets that give you the opportunity to grow. You're not stuck just doing the specific things you have done in your classes. You have learned how to think. You've learned how to collaborate. You've learned how to communicate. You've learned how to grow and to be a leader. And you can use those tools. They're your tool set, and you can use those to be successful in the world. And you can add to those tools as you go. And so you've been given a great start, and then it's up to you to just keep going for it. I think that the best advice is to go for what you want, and you will find a way to get there because you've got a great basis.
That's awesome. You are such a well of wisdom. So I'm going to come back to it. So here's my last and final question for you. What are your top 3 tips from your top positions to those looking to climb the ladder of success?
Number 1 is to believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself and trust yourself, your inner voice, because that is always going to tell you the right move for you. And it may not be the same for everybody else, but you should trust yourself because that will always send you in the right direction. I think then I would have to say the next one is to stay positive, because I feel like the glass is always filling up. And if you can see that there's good things that will come from something, even if it doesn't look great at the moment, there is always a way to go forward. And especially, as I say, you can manifest things if you hold that vision. You need to envision, you need to imagine, you need to create, but you need to do it from a positive perspective because I believe you get what you expect. And so let's expect good things to happen. And then I think the third thing would be to create a wonderful network of women, because the women are wise. And I think we work well together and that we grow, and not just ourselves, but we support each other. We support different generations of women, and we then affect community and society in a way that's very important. And I think the women, the network of women that I have started out with Marie and at Miami, and it's been ongoing with women through time. And it makes it not only more successful, but a lot more fun.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for being a trailblazer. You know, you graduated in 74, so you definitely blazed a trail for me coming behind in 92. And listening to all that you had to share today, I just think it's so phenomenal. And I think the thing that rings out most to me is the very message that we called this conversation, which is choosing what's best for you all career long. And you exhibited that so powerfully. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. So Molly's going to come back and help to close us out. And Dianne, I just appreciate the opportunity to have connected with you.
Well, thank you so much. And you've been wonderful. Made it an easy thing to do. I appreciate both of you. But Denise, your questions are well thought out and really helped me walk through. It's been actually fun to walk through this with you.
Oh, that's awesome. It's that analysis degree.
Yep, it is.
Yeah, I have to say that was a really outstanding conversation. Denise, well-developed questions. Dianne, such really robust responses that were like actually meaty. You know, we can also maybe take something away and apply it, you know, in our existence in our own workplaces, and perhaps even at home in our personal lives. We do have a couple questions from the audience. So, and I'm going to paraphrase this question. You mentioned sort of a certain point, somebody said to you, you're a little too big for your britches, which I think all of us have maybe had those moments in one way or another. Have you ever encountered other women who sort of lay down some resistance in the same way you might meet from other men in the workforce? I think there's some difficult personalities who may not realize that they've given other women a tough row to hoe. Do you have any advice for sort of navigating around that?
Well, I think women are going to have those characteristics as much as men. I think we have to acknowledge that there's difficult women out there. Absolutely. And I have met with some. I had to work closely with a woman who we just could not find that easy path together. And basically, you know, I would just have to hold my ground the way I could with respect. And she may or may not hold hers, but we had to find a way to be able to move forward, even though we didn't really see eye to eye and we didn't really operate in the same way. But I think it's important that we are true to who we are, and but also give respect to the other person. We don't have to like it, and but we do have to work together. Find some way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's so important. The respect thread. I think, you know, with mutual respect, everything is a lot easier and more navigable for sure. Any thoughts on that for you, Denise?
Oh, you know, I was over here brewing, right? So the one thing I would add is to not lose yourself in it. Like, continue to know your value and your worth in that particular scenario. And I think Dianne is right that you have to figure out a common ground to work for and towards. And I think maintaining your own standards, and don't allow them to bring out the worst of you, but allow it to bring out the best of you, and find a way to influence it with your goodness, because that's what's going to make a difference. But she's right. It could just be that we won't get along, but don't let that disrupt you from being having integrity with the work, as well as with your value, your worth, and your own standards. Because sometimes we allow things to just get to us, and we start giving off attitude before we know it, and we start having ourselves show up in a way that's not who we are. And we've all had those moments, right? But I think what Dianne said around reminding yourself of your value and your worth, and beginning to speak those things to yourself, so that when you have those difficult situations, you don't allow them to overtake you, but you can be prepared to respond to them and maintain your integrity.
Oh, it was like you were in my head when you were saying sometimes we come out with attitude. I'm guilty of that myself. When you say it out loud, I'm like, okay, don't let it get away from you. You know, allow yourself to maintain who you are and what you're convicted to. Okay, final question. Dianne, can you tell us what you're up to these days? What
Yes.
initiatives are you involved in? How are you keeping yourself busy?
Well, I have a very wonderful life. I think I'm very blessed. I have a loving husband and family. I travel every 2 months to the East Coast to see my family there, or Spain, where my son is, Illinois to see my 91-year-old mother. I meditate. I have a very active spiritual practice. I'm outside every day, exercising, walking, hiking, biking, kayaking, or bird watching. We've got an RV. We travel around. I do volunteering. I have a group of young women in Africa. We're trying to get educated to sort of change their stars a little bit. And I do some projects here for people. So I keep trying to stay in service as well as keep a good, healthy lifestyle and see the people I love, tell the people I love them, and see my friends and stay close.
All the good stuff.
Yeah.
Indeed.
You know, that's
Indeed.
what I was going to say too, Molly. You know how they say hashtag relationship goals? I got hashtag life goals over there.
Hashtag do it like Dianne.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, exactly. I'm so pleased to hear that you know, after such a successful career, that you have this freedom to go be exactly who you were meant to be, you know, your spiritual self, yourself as a family member, as a mother, a daughter. I'm just so pleased to hear that you have been able to prioritize accordingly and really come out at the end of your career feeling good and proud about the way that you were able to sort of juggle all the identities that come with being a woman. And I'm sure Denise knows what I'm talking about when I say that. So exciting conversation. I'm really, really digging these conversations with the Women's Advisory Committee. So I hope everyone will tune in again for us. If no one has any questions, I don't think we do have them rolling in. I think we're good to wrap up.
Thank you, Dianne. Thank you, Molly.
And thank you both for joining us. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm, like I said, looking forward to the next one. Just a reminder for all of our viewers that this recording will be available on our website later today. And of course, you can check out our other webinar presentations, including our inaugural speaker series episode at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Thank you all for joining us today, and love and honor to you all. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.